There is one change in the Australian PR system in 2026 that almost nobody is talking about. Not the big migration agents, not the popular immigration forums, not even most of the YouTube channels covering Australian PR. And yet this single change is quietly affecting the chances of thousands of skilled migrants who are working hard, scoring their points, preparing their documents, and doing everything they believe is right, but still not getting closer to their Australian permanent residency. I have been watching this closely, and today I am going to tell you exactly what this change is, why it matters more than almost anything else in the current Australian immigration landscape, and most importantly, what you personally need to do right now to make sure this change works in your favor rather than against you. This is genuinely a must-watch video for anyone who is serious about Australian PR in 2026, so please do not skip ahead, do not close this video, and do not assume you already know what I am going to say, because I can almost guarantee that what I am about to share with you is something you have not heard explained this clearly before. Welcome to Australia PR Insider, the channel that is built entirely around one commitment, and that commitment is to give you the most honest, the most accurate, and the most useful information about Australian immigration that you will find anywhere online. We do not chase views with clickbait that leads nowhere. We do not recycle the same generic advice that every other channel repeats endlessly. And we do not water down the truth to make it easier to hear. On Australia PR Insider, we tell you what is actually happening in the Australian immigration system so that you can make decisions that genuinely move your life forward. If you are not yet subscribed to this channel, please do that right now and turn on the bell notification because staying informed on this channel is one of the most valuable things you can do for your PR journey. Now let us get straight into the one change that everyone is missing and why it matters so much for your plan in 2026. To understand this change properly, you first need to understand how the Australian Skill Select invitation system actually works at its most fundamental level. When you submit an expression of interest for Australian PR, you are not applying for a visa directly. You are entering a pool of candidates who are all competing for a limited number of invitation slots that are released in regular invitation rounds. In each round, the Department of Home Affairs invites the highest scoring candidates from the pool first, working down through the scores until all available invitation places for that round have been filled. Your position in this queue is determined by two things: your points score and the date and time at which you submitted your expression of interest. If two candidates have exactly the same points score, the one who submitted their expression of interest earlier gets priority. This system has been in place for years, and most applicants understand it at this basic level. But here is what most people are missing, and this is where the change that I am talking about today becomes critically important. The change that almost everyone is overlooking is the fundamental shift in how Australia is now allocating its annual migration program places across the different visa streams within the General Skilled Migration Program. In previous years, the distribution of visa places between the subclass 189 Independent Skilled Visa, the subclass 190 State Nominated Visa, and the subclass 491 Skilled Work Regional Visa followed a relatively predictable pattern. Applicants could form reasonable expectations about how many places would be available in their chosen visa stream and could plan their strategy accordingly. What has changed in 2026 is that the Australian government has dramatically rebalanced this internal allocation in a way that most applicants and even many migration professionals have not fully absorbed yet. The allocation of places toward the subclass 189 independent pathway has been significantly reduced, while the allocation toward state-nominated and regional visa pathways has been substantially increased. In simple terms, this means that if you are exclusively targeting the subclass 189 visa and relying on the independent pathway as your only route to Australian PR, you are now competing for a much smaller slice of a smaller overall pie. The number of 189 invitations being issued in each round has decreased, and the point scores required to receive one of those invitations have risen in direct response. Meanwhile, the 190 state-nominated pathway and the 491 regional pathway have more places available and in many cases lower effective pass marks because the government is actively trying to fill these allocations to meet its regional and state-specific labor market objectives. Now let me explain why this specific rebalancing is the one change that everyone is missing and why it matters so profoundly. The vast majority of skilled migrants who are planning for Australian PR still have the subclass 189 as their primary and often their only target. This has been the default thinking for years because the 189 visa is the cleanest and most straightforward pathway. No employer needed, no state nomination needed, just your own point score and an eligible occupation. And for a long time, this thinking was completely rational because the 189 program was well-resourced and invitation rounds were relatively generous. But in 2026, continuing to focus exclusively on the 189 pathway, without seriously reconsidering the 190 and 491 options, is no longer a rational strategy for most applicants. It is like standing in the longest and slowest moving queue at an airport when there are shorter and faster moving queues right next to you that most people are simply not noticing because they have been conditioned to default to the familiar option. The rebalancing of visa allocations is Australia's way of redirecting the flow of skilled migrants toward where it actually needs them, and the applicants who recognize this shift and adapt their strategy accordingly are the ones who are going to move through the system faster and more successfully than those who do not. Let me now go deeper into what this means for each of the 3 visa pathways so you can see clearly how the rebalancing affects your specific situation. For the subclass 189 independent skilled visa, the reduced allocation means you now need to be among the very top scoring candidates in your occupation to have a realistic chance of receiving an invitation within a reasonable time frame. If your current point score sits below 85 or 90 points for most competitive occupations, the honest reality is that the 189 pathway may keep you waiting for 2, 3, or even more years without any guarantee of an invitation. This is not a reason to abandon the 189 pathway entirely if your score is genuinely high, but it is an urgent reason to stop treating the 189 as your only option if your score is in the mid-range. For the subclass 190 state-nominated visa, the increased allocation of places means that state nomination has become a more powerful and more accessible pathway than it has been in several years. States have more nomination places to fill, and they are actively seeking qualified applicants in shortage occupations. However, as I mentioned earlier, states are being more selective about who they nominate, and they are prioritizing applicants with genuine connections to their state and occupations that address real documented shortages in their local economy. The key to succeeding on the 190 pathway in 2026 is specificity and genuine engagement with a target state rather than simultaneously applying to every state and hoping for the best. Research the specific state you want to live in, understand what occupations they are currently prioritizing, demonstrate a real connection to that state, and make a targeted and compelling case for why you should be nominated. For the subclass 491 skilled work regional visa, the news is perhaps the most positive of all 3 pathways. The government's commitment to regional development and population distribution is translating directly into more nomination places, more active recruitment of skilled migrants by regional states and territories, and in some cases dedicated fast-track processes for shortage occupations in regional areas. The 491 requires you to live and work in a regional area of Australia for 3 years before you can apply for the permanent subclass 191 visa, but the definition of regional Australia is broader than most people realize and includes many areas that offer genuine quality of life, strong employment markets, good schools, and well-developed community infrastructure. If you have been dismissing the 491 pathway based on a misconception that regional Australia means remote and isolated, it is worth doing fresh research because the reality on the ground in 2026 is very different from that assumption. Now let me address the second dimension of the change that everyone is missing because it connects directly to the rebalancing I just described. Alongside the shift in visa place allocation, there has been a significant but quietly implemented change in how the Department of Home Affairs is treating the age of expressions of interest in the skill select pool. For many years, the convention was that older expressions of interest, meaning applications that had been sitting in the pool for a longer period of time, were given a kind of informal priority at the same point score because the tie-breaking rule favors earlier submission dates. This created a situation where some applicants felt confident simply sitting in the pool for a long period of time, believing that their wait would eventually be rewarded with an invitation even at a modest point score. The current policy environment has effectively undermined this strategy. With fewer 189 places available and pass marks rising, the age of your expression of interest only matters if your point score is already at or very near the current pass mark. If your score is significantly below the current competitive level, your submission date offers you no practical advantage whatsoever because you are simply not in the running for the available invitation places regardless of how long you have been waiting. This is a genuinely important insight because it means that sitting and waiting without actively working to improve your score is not a strategy. It is a delay that costs you time, costs you age-related points as you grow older, and costs you English test and skills assessment validity as those documents approach their expiry dates. The actionable conclusion from everything I have shared with you today is this. The one change that everyone is missing in 2026 is the fundamental rebalancing of Australia's skilled migration program away from the independent 189 pathway and toward the state-nominated 190 pathway and the regional 491 pathway. If your current strategy is built entirely around the 189 visa and your point score is not in the top tier of competitiveness for your occupation, you need to revise that strategy today. Look seriously at the 190 pathway. Identify the state that best matches your occupation and your circumstances, build a genuine connection to that state, and make a targeted nomination application. Look seriously at the 491 pathway. Research what regional Australia actually looks like in 2026, and consider whether 3 years of regional living is a worthwhile investment in exchange for a faster and more accessible route to permanent residency. And regardless of which pathway you pursue, invest every possible effort into increasing your point score, pushing your English to superior level, maximizing your work experience points, and ensuring every component of your application is valid, current, and as strong as it can possibly be. That is the full picture of the one change that everyone is missing, and I truly hope that this video has given you the clarity, the honesty, and the practical direction that you came here for. If this video opened your eyes to something important, please hit the thumbs up button right now because it genuinely helps Australia PR Insider reach more people who need this exact information at this exact moment in their journey. Subscribe to Australia PR Insider if you have not already. Turn on your notifications and share this video with anyone you know who is planning for Australian PR because this is information they cannot afford to miss. Drop your questions, your current points score, your occupation, or anything else you want me to cover in the comments below. I read every single comment, and I will personally reply to as many as I can. Your Australian PR is not out of reach. It just requires a strategy that matches the reality of 2026 rather than the assumptions of the past. Until the next video, keep moving forward with full awareness, and I will see you very soon on Australia PR Insider.